You put on a shirt this morning without thinking. Maybe it took 3 seconds. Maybe you grabbed whatever was closest. Maybe you didn't even look. But that simple act, that completely automatic, forgettable moment, is the result of something ancient and strange and far darker than fashion. Because for most of human history, nobody wore clothes. Not a stitch, not a wrap, not a leaf. And then around 170,000 years ago, something changed. Not gradually, not because someone had a great idea. Something happened to the human body that made clothes not a choice, but a survival mechanism. And the thing that forced our ancestors to cover themselves, it wasn't cold, it wasn't modesty, it was something so small it's almost invisible to the naked eye. Let's go back, way back. Picture the earliest modern humans, Homo sapiens. Standing upright, long-limbed, dark-skinned, sweating brilliantly in the heat of sub-Saharan Africa. For hundreds of thousands of years, they were naked. Completely, practically, functionally naked. And it worked perfectly. Their bodies were built for it. Human skin is a masterpiece of temperature regulation. Unlike almost every other mammal on the planet, humans lost most of their body hair over millions of years of evolution. And that wasn't an accident. Naked skin, combined with millions of eccrine sweat glands, allowed early humans to do something almost no other creature could: run in the heat of the day, for hours, without overheating. While lions napped in the shade, humans hunted. While prey animals collapsed from exertion, humans kept going. Skin was the technology. Nakedness was the advantage. So why cover it up? Here's what changed. And it gets stranger than you'd expect. Around 100,000 to 170,000 years ago, during a period of brutal climate instability, parts of Africa cooled dramatically. Grasslands contracted, resources shrank. Some populations of early humans were pushed into new environments. Coastal fringes, mountain highlands, regions where, for the first time, their bare skin was no longer enough. But here's the thing. We don't actually have ancient clothes. Fabric decays, hides rot. The oldest preserved clothing fragments are only around 30,000 years old. So how do scientists know when humans actually started covering themselves? They looked at lice. In 2003, evolutionary biologist Mark Stoneking at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology did something that sounds absurd. He studied the genetics of human body lice to figure out when clothes appeared. And it works because body lice, unlike head lice, can only live in clothing. They need fibers to attach their eggs to. They cannot survive on bare skin alone. By tracing the point at which body lice diverged from head lice, Stoneking and his team could pinpoint the moment clothing became a regular part of human life. The answer came back, maybe as far back as 170,000 years ago in colder populations. Clothes didn't just appear. They were written into our parasites. But that's only half the story. Because the first clothes were not sewn. They were not cut. They were barely clothes at all. They were hides. Raw animal skins, scraped clean of fat with stone tools and draped over the body. Heavy, stiff, probably foul-smelling after a few days. Nothing like the neat pelt wraps you might imagine from a museum diorama. The earliest wearable hides were more like carrying a wet rug on your shoulders than wearing a coat. The tools that made this possible, small, sharp stone scrapers called hide-working tools, start appearing in the archaeological record around the same period. Archaeologist Francesco De Rico at the University of Bordeaux has identified these tools at sites across southern Africa, their edges worn in patterns consistent with scraping animal skin, not butchering meat. Someone was working hides deliberately, repeatedly, as a practice. But here's the counterintuitive twist. The thing that really accelerated clothing wasn't the cold, it was a needle. The first bone needle, a thin, curved sliver of bone with a punched hole at one end, was found in Siberia and dates to roughly 50,000 years ago. Before the needle, animal skins could only be draped or tied loosely. After the needle, they could be cut and stitched into shapes that actually fit the body. Fitted clothing traps a layer of warm air against the skin. It's the difference between wrapping yourself in a blanket and wearing a jacket. The needle didn't just make clothes more comfortable. It made cold weather survival genuinely possible. Within a few thousand years of the needle's appearance, modern humans had spread into some of the coldest places on Earth: Northern Europe, Central Asia. eventually Siberia, and across the land bridge into the Americas. The needle didn't follow the migration followed the needle. And here's where it gets strange in a way nobody talks about. Clothing didn't just protect the body from the cold, it changed the body. Once humans started wearing clothes regularly, the evolutionary pressure to maintain dense body hair dropped almost to zero. If you have a hide to keep you warm, you don't need fur. Over tens of thousands of years, the last traces of the body hair that primates typically carry became functionally useless. Clothes didn't just cover our nakedness, they made us more naked. We dressed ourselves into the bodies we have now. But that's still not the whole story. Because somewhere along the way, something shifted. Clothing stopped being purely functional and became something else entirely, a signal, a symbol, a statement about who you were, where you came from, and whether you were friend or threat. Anthropologist Gillian Crowther has documented how in virtually every known human culture, no matter how isolated, no matter how warm the climate, clothing or body ornamentation carries social meaning that goes far beyond temperature. The Yagan people of Tierra del Fuego, one of the coldest inhabited places on Earth, wore almost no clothing despite freezing temperatures. Instead, they coated themselves in animal fat and relied on extreme metabolic adaptation. But they still wore ornaments, strings of beads, shells around the neck, markings on the body. The drive to signal identity through what we put on our bodies appears to be as old as the drive to stay warm. Archaeologist Francesco De Rico found perforated shell beads at sites in Morocco and Algeria dating to 130,000 years ago. Older than the earliest sewn garments. Older than most bone needles. Humans were decorating their bodies before they were functionally dressing them. Which means the real origin story of clothing isn't a story about cold. It's a story about being seen. Early humans in a group needed to know instantly, is this person part of my group? Are they friend or stranger? Does the way they look match what I know? Body ornamentation was the original answer to that question, a system of visual identity so old it predates language as we know it. The clothes followed the beads, not the other way around. Now think about this morning. The shirt you grabbed without looking, the color you didn't consciously choose, the brand sitting against your chest, the cut that fits the way you carry yourself, the choice, unconscious or deliberate, of what you put on before you faced the world. You were doing what humans have done for at least 130,000 years, not getting dressed, announcing yourself. The shirt took 3 seconds. The instinct behind it is older than civilization, older than agriculture, older than most things we call human. You put it on without thinking. But the reason you put it on at all? That goes back to a cold wind, a bone needle, and the oldest question your species ever asked, who are you, and how will the rest of us know?